Welcome back everybody to your weekly dose of motorcycle news, where in this episode we'll look at Honda's new massive warranty, some news on their rather unusual new V3 engine, Triumph's prizes for this year's DGR, Ducati's impressive looking new motocross bike, and a special edition headset from Cardo. Then there's news on BMW's F900R Cup, a humongous price tag for this rather special looking Brough Superior. There's a bunch of news from the industry with some companies still suffering and some, to be fair, thriving. Norton could have a competitor on the way for Triumph's best-selling bikes. And we'll round off with why I think April Fool's just totally sucks now. But before I go on a rant about that, let's start with the good news for prospective Honda customers in that they just announced a new 6-year warranty. Now, perhaps this is in response to Suzuki's 7-year warranty or also recently KTM's 4-year extended warranty. But it is a huge step up from the existing 2 years that you currently get with a Honda. Now, as with those other manufacturers, of course, you're going to have your bike serviced at an authorized Honda dealer. You also have to follow the specific service plan for that bike. But every year, when you get your sort of service registered on their digital system, it'll apply another 12-month extension that should have you covered. It's also worth adding as well that this warranty is registered to the bike. I think that was true of the KTM one as well. It's not registered specifically to the owner, and so that means it can be continued if you do sell it on second hand, as long as, again, they follow the service plan with the authorized dealer. Great stuff, in my opinion. It's always going to be good for the customer to get a longer warranty, especially if you're someone who can already get their bike serviced by a proper main dealer. On top of that as well, though, we recently covered quite a few times actually their new V3 engine, which looks really quite unusual. There's nothing else like it on the market, and it also uses an electric compressor for forced induction, so hopefully it's pretty punchy too. Now, we first saw the prototype of this at EICMA last year, but increasingly these little updates are seeping out, which do suggest it's moving closer and closer to production. One of the recent bits of news was that in Europe at least, they'd patented the name V3R, which suggests it could be put to use in a bike like a sports bike or maybe a sporty naked, following that convention of the CB1000R, for example. But this week, Cycle World have reported that both the names V3R and V3RE compressor have also been patented in the US. So great news if you like the look of this engine and you're located in North America, as it looks like it will be available there too, which isn't always the case with Hondas. Not everything that's on sale in Japan and Europe is always on sale in the US. What the final bike will look like is still pretty much unknown. We don't even know actually what capacity this engine will be. But of course, we'll definitely report on it as soon as we got more details. So if you're not subscribed already, then I'd definitely recommend subscribing to get all the news on this engine as soon as it comes out. Now, this year's Distinguished Gentleman's Ride is coming up pretty soon. And as usual, Triumph have generously donated a bike, or multiple bikes in this case, to be awarded to the top fundraisers, which it has to be said is a pretty sweet prize. If you're not familiar with the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, or DGR, well, it's the world's biggest charity event for classic and vintage motorcycle enthusiasts. And this year, this global event will take place on the 18th of May, Sunday the 18th of May. All of the funds raised, I think I'm right in saying, go to Movember, which is a charity that supports prostate cancer and men's mental health. And Triumph, it says, have now been the official motorcycle partner for 12 years running. So look, the top fundraiser will get this year their choice of either the lower slunk X version or the more off-roady XE version of Triumph's awesome Scrambler 1200. Finished, I should also add, either of the bikes in their Icon Edition, which is limited to this year only and sort of gives it a bit more of a heritage vibe with that really old school Triumph logo on the tank and also a little bit more detail in the paintwork. Then, 2 runners-up, plus the winner of the Gentlefolk Prize, which is chosen at random, will get their choice of a modern classic. Any modern classic from the Triumph lineup, which I think that's pretty amazing. To be honest, it got me digging into their rewards page on the DGR website, and there's all sorts on there. Like Hedon Helmets are giving away a free helmet to the top 100 fundraisers, and also our wonderful partners over at Quadlock, they're also giving a $150 voucher to the top 100 fundraisers as well. Clearly, your motivation for raising funds for charity should be probably more selfless than picking up one of these prizes, but if you did need a little bit of extra incentive, then a brand new Bonnie, plus a brand new head and helmet, plus a quadlock voucher, and then there are also a bunch of other ones, well, it ought to do the trick, I suppose. Now, you probably remember recently that Triumph have started to dip their toe into the motocross and enduro markets with, most recently, their 2 new enduro bikes announced just last week. But they're not the only major motorcycle manufacturer hoping to broaden their product lineup, with Ducati also this week unveiling the full details of their new Desmo 450 MX. Now, in the UK at least, bikes will be available in selected Ducati dealers from June, and some of the tech specs just this week have been made public for the first time, and it's got to be said, it does look pretty impressive. I'm not a connoisseur of this style of bike, but yeah, it does make for quite tasty reading. So as you might have guessed, it's a 450 single, liquid cooled. You know, you might have deduced that from the Desmo 450 name, and you also might have figured out that it does indeed get their signature Desmo valve system, which typically helps with top-end revvy performance. And there is plenty of punch on tap with this bike. It's got 62 horsepower at 9,400 RPM. It redlines at 11,900 RPM, and Ducati say that this peaky figure is a new benchmark for this category of bike. Now, peak torque also comes in at 53 Nm at 7,500 RPM, and it all sits in a rather slender chassis built upon an aluminium perimeter frame that weighs in, ready to ride but without fuel, which seems to be Ducati's new way of measuring how much their bikes weigh, at just 104.8 kilograms, which is pretty light, I think it's fair to say. Now, like I say, I haven't got a fine eye for this sort of bike, but a quick overview is that you get suspension from Showa with boatloads of travel, over 300mm, brakes from Brembo, and then also all sorts of tech with a couple of riding modes, launch control, engine brake control, and a quick shifter. Very nice looking indeed, and so if you also like what you see, then you'll just need the £11,245 in order to pick one up. A new Cardo headset is probably more in my budget, and while electronics and gadgets generally aesthetically aren't the most daring devices, well, it looks like Cardo are trying to set that straight at the moment with a new product that's tied in with custom bike builders at Roland Sands Design. Just 1,000 of these will be made available in a relatively small run, with each of them being numbered and also getting a signed certificate, so there's an element of exclusivity. But for me, more so than that, it gets the typical Roland Sands black and gold paint job on it, and I've got to say it looks pretty sweet tied in with that black and gold bell bullet lid. I'm going to say it looks like a bell bullet that they've used in these promo shots. Under the paint though, it's their PackTalk Pro, which is their flagship comms device that gets all sorts of brilliant features built in, like their crash detection system, 45mm JBL design speakers, dynamic mesh communications, which in my opinion is far superior to Bluetooth comms, and also their magnetic air mount system, so you can just clip it on really easily. My favorite thing about it though, and I guess this might be powered by the motion sensor that they've included in this device for the crash detection, is the fact that it turns itself on and off with motion, so you can leave your helmet, you know, on the shelf between rides and it'll automatically turn off. And then as soon as you pick it up and put it on your head and go out for a ride, it switches itself on, which is super cool. And it means you never drain the battery by forgetting to turn it off. And also you never forget to turn it on, so the crash detection is always working. Fantastic product. Like the look of this Roland Sands one as well, and we'll leave a link down in the description below. And also we've got a discount code for Cardo products because they're one of our sponsors. Now, BMW's F900R Naked offers, you know, really good value for money, but when I reviewed the previous generation, it just didn't quite light my fire. Despite a decent spec sheet, it just didn't feel that exciting to ride. Hopefully in 2025 they've put that right. They've got a new version of this bike with a more direct dynamic riding mode, so a bit more throttle response, a more aggressive riding position as well. They've lowered the bars so it's a bit more over the front. I think they've tweaked the suspension too. There's an Akropovich accessory silencer. All little changes to make it a bit more sporty feeling, perhaps, I hope. And we'll certainly find out soon in the coming couple of weeks because I've got a press bike on the way, so hopefully it's done the trick. But the other thing that they seem to be doing to try and give this bike a bit more of a, spicy image is running a support class for British superbikes, this single series cup called, of course, the F900R Cup, which started back in 2023. BMW say it offers an accessible, cost-effective way to go racing with a highly competitive series that showcased some close racing over the years with a talented depth of riders, averaging 46 riders across 9 rounds, and including some high-profile guest riders including Troy Corser, Niall Mackenzie, and James Ellison. Anyway, just this week, the reason I've got this in the news is that they've confirmed it will continue, of course, into 2025 for its 3rd season now. But also, they've committed to a couple more years, so that'll take it up to the end of 2027. I guess if you're thinking about getting involved, then there's a bit more incentive if you can guarantee that you'll get a few seasons out of your bike. And they do sell it as a package, so I think it's £13,242. Through a BMW UK dealer, will get you a brand new 2025 F900R, along with a full race kit. So you get K-Tech suspension upgrades, I think it's a new shock and fork internals, an AIO exhaust, which I've got to say on this engine actually does sound fantastic. Rear sets, a quick shifter, the racing bodywork as well, and also an ECU upgrade to boot, which I think that's not bad, a race bike for the money. If you've got a little more cash to splash though, then you could have picked yourself up a very special looking classic bike, this Brough Superior, with the National Motorcycle Museum recently in the UK hosting the H&H Classics Motorcycle and Scooter Auction. Now, as reported in MCN, this 1930 Brough Superior SS100 was specifically built for George Brough, who was, of course, the founder of the company Brough, hence the name. Now, these bikes are already pretty rare, with just 21 of them made in that particular year. But then also this specific example of being ridden by George Brough, which adds a bit more backstory. They say he used it in events like the Edinburgh Trial. Then, this one was fully restored in 1980. It's had a couple of stints at the National Motorcycle Museum as well, I believe. But it sold on the day at the auction for an astonishing £241,500. So £8.5 short of £250,000. By my calculations, you could get 18 and a quarter F900R race bikes for the same money. So I'd love to know from you in the comments, would you like a stinky old classic or 18 and a quarter F900R race bikes? Let me know what you think in the comments. Meanwhile, there are plenty of ups and downs in the motorcycle industry to report on, as is always the way with the news show at the moment. There are plenty of companies struggling, of course, but some seemingly doing quite well, like, Ducati we reported on recently with their really strong revenue figures, or Triumph also selling more bikes than they ever have done in the past. On the downside, Harley's annual results, we covered those a couple of episodes back. They were pretty poor, as were Indians, who as a result discontinued, if you remember, the entire FTR lineup in order to focus on the more profitable big cruisers and tourers and stuff like that. And thing is, things could be about to get even more tricky for both of those brands potentially, with Trump's tariffs soon coming into effect, and as a result, potentially some retaliatory tariffs that could massively push up the price of American bikes outside of their home market. Now, Visor Down report one source as saying that it could be the death knell for Harley, with them already kind of struggling, and they give one very extreme example of Denmark, where a $27,999 road glide in the US, combined with the tariffs and also the really high taxes in Denmark, could cost the equivalent of $124,000, which would make it almost impossible to justify, of course. There's all sorts you could buy for that money. How this all plays out does remain to be seen, but it doesn't look particularly great if you're looking to buy a Harley or an Indian in Europe in the next few months. KTM are also very much in that list of strugglers at the moment. In fact, they're the prime example of it probably, with their recent self-administration process, and that comes off the back of a massive backlog of unsold bikes and subsequently some massive debts racked up. Now, whilst they were going through some of those court proceedings around that self-administration, they paused production, then sought some money in order to get things back up and running, which apparently they managed to get hold of. And it's now been confirmed in MCN that production is in fact back underway at their Austria plant. There isn't a great deal more detail than that though, so specifically what they're building is still unknown, with MCM stating that a KTM spokesperson confirmed to MCN that production had restarted, however wouldn't comment on which models are being produced, when new bikes would arrive in dealers, or whether they were being built on multiple shift patterns. Now I'm led to believe, because they're built in India by Bajaj, that the new 390 models are still kind of on target, on schedule, so they should be out in the next couple of months. And I guess, with CF Moto building a lot of the 790s out in China, potentially those will still be flowing through as well. But it looks like the more premium bikes that were made in Austria or were planned to be made in Austria, so the 990s and the 1390s, well, those are the most likely, realistically, to be significantly delayed. And still with those 250,000 bikes to get through that they had sitting unsold, and they put massive discounts on them to get rid of them. Well, while it is good PR to get it out there that the factory's back up and running, I can't imagine that they're churning out as many bikes as possible in the next month or two. So yeah, those new for 2025 bikes, the 990 RCR, the 990 Duke R, the 1390 Super Adventures, the 1390 Super Duke GT, my guess is it'll be well into the summer, if not after the summer, towards the back end of the year, that we'll even be able to get hold of one for review, until we'll see them in dealers and eventually see them out on the road. So yeah, things are moving in the right direction for KTM, but clearly all their problems aren't going to be solved in a couple of days, are they? On a more positive note though, following on from other brands announcing their annual results, Royal Enfield have just published theirs for 2024, and it does make for much healthier reading. In the last financial year, they've sold over 1 million bikes, 1,009,900, somewhat driven by the success of their Hunter 350, which we recently reported has sold 500,000 units since being introduced in 2022. And of course it has, it's a great looking bike at a really affordable price point at just under $4,000. That million bikes means they were 11% up on the previous year, which is impressive, and their CEO had the following to say about it. This year has been nothing short of extraordinary for Royal Enfield. Crossing the 1 million annual sales milestone, our highest ever, is a testament to how far we've come. From a time when 50,000 motorcycles a year felt like a big win, to now setting new global benchmarks in the mid-size segment, our journey has been incredible. Clearly, there's decent money to be made out of building small to mid-capacity affordable bikes, and with British brand Norton being bought a few years back by Indian manufacturers TVS, well, that could be their imminent direction of travel as well, according to Bike Wally. They report that TVS are working on a 300 to 400cc retro with a liquid-cooled single-cylinder engine, and the idea, of course, is for it to go head-to-head with the likes of the Enfields and also the recently successful Triumph 400s. It'd be built by TVS in India to keep the cost down, but of course they capitalise on that Norton brand by slapping it on the tank, and apparently their plan is to get something on the market by 2028, which is, to be fair, still quite a way off. But I'd love to know what you think down in the comments. Is it a good idea, or would it kind of cheapen what is, positioned to be quite a premium and exclusive brand? Last up, unfortunately, it's the start of April, so naturally the April Fool's gags were being wheeled out this week, and I've got to say, I've kind of given up caring a bit. Shoei announced an aerodynamic helmet, for example, Kawasaki launched a new brake-by voice feature, and Suzuki announced a motorcycle version of their Jimny 4x4. Thing is though, maybe some of these April Fools were kind of decent when there was actually some effort involved to produce them, and so people would only probably go ahead with it if they actually thought they had a really good idea. An extreme example is if you go back to that famous one in the UK anyway, on the BBC in the 50s, where they covered in a sort of news report what was meant to be a spaghetti farm. Someone had to hang all the spaghettis in the trees and film it and get the actors and all that sort of stuff, and so you've got to say it looks like a fair bit of effort went into that. Even just a few years back, you still had to go and take photographs of stuff or be decent at Photoshop to spend the time making something that looks legit. But now with AI, you can make pretty much anything within just a few seconds. I went on ChatGPT, for example. Give me 5 ideas for April Fool's pranks about Triumph Bonnevilles for my motorcycle Instagram account. One of them was a sidecar hot tub. I got a picture of a Watsonian Bonneville sidecar, and then I used the generative AI fill on Photoshop to put a hot tub in it. Job done. ChatGPT even gave me a caption. It said, "Ride hard, relax harder, limited edition Bonneville Spa edition, BYO towel, hashtag sidecar soak, hashtag hot tub on wheels, hashtag April Fools. It was already a bit rubbish, wasn't it, April Fools? But I think it's even worse now that there's no friction to creating something. And so I'd love to know again what you think. Is it time to put the whole thing in the bin? I'd argue yes, but let me know what you think down in the comments. And a big thanks to AI for ruining another thing. As always though, leave us a comment with what you thought of this week's news. I always enjoy reading them. I'll put last week's episode on the screen now so you can give it a watch. We covered the physical prototype for potentially a new retro from Honda, amongst other things. Do hit subscribe as well for more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.